Hello, and welcome back to another Blu-ray review and another Eureka Masters of Cinema title, spine number 293 in the collection, from director Kinji Fukusaku, Wolves, Pigs, and Men, from 1964. So we have Ken Takakura in the lead role in this film, and it is a Yakuza film, and a very interesting one, especially when you kind of pair it up with the history of Yakuza films in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and this kind of straddles the kind of the transition point somewhat to more gritty Yakuza films, which we'll talk about very shortly. But Wolves, Pigs, and Men, 1964. I definitely was a little bit mixed going into this one. Obviously it's an MoC title, so I'm definitely gonna check it out and see what it's all about. But I was a little unenthused, and I would say the one film in the whole collection that I've seen so far that I like the least, I should say, is Youth of the Beast, which is what's his name? I forgot the director's name. I mean, it should be on the shelf somewhere. I think it's directly behind me, which is will be kind of awkward to get to. What's his name? Seijin Suzuki, is it? Either way, Youth of the Beast. Didn't love it, didn't hate it, and so there's another one I watched that I didn't get on with at all, and it was really like, and that was a Seijin Suzuki film for sure. It wasn't Retaliation. It was another. It was a similar one, Branded to Kill or something like that. I wasn't a fan of that. I'd be intrigued to go back to it actually. And that's the thing. You kind of you watch films and you decide you don't like certain things, and then you watch something else and it kind of changes your perspective on things. Anyway, so Yakuza films I generally don't do too well with. I talked about that before when we talked about Violent Streets by Hideo Gosho, which was released last year. I really liked that one. But this film, and again, we talked a little about it in the Abashiri Bangaichi series as well, which was released this year in a trilogy set, Prison Walls. Anyway, with this film, going in, I was a bit trepidatious, as always, with the Yakuza film. And I came away thinking, shit, do I really like Yakuza films now and really want to watch more of them? And I guess this isn't really your traditional Yakuza film, and it feels at times a bit like film noir. There's influence of that, I feel. Apparently, there's also French New Wave influence, which I didn't really pick up on, but definitely it felt like more American in style at certain points of the story. Actually reminded me a lot of Reservoir Dogs. So I would not be surprised if Tarantino had seen this, but at the same time it's not all that similar to Reservoir Dogs, but it gave me that feeling because a majority of this movie takes place in one location. Now there are other locations and so on, and it's not like you open there and that's where the whole movie takes place, but once the second act begins, we're in this kind of rundown shack, and that remains kind of the focal area of the pretty much the entire story for the rest of the film from that point on. So the film revolves around three brothers, and you can kind of apply the title of the movie to the three brothers. Wolf, a pig, and a man. So the three brothers are played by Ken Takakura. He plays the middle brother, who's essentially the lead of the film, and his name is Jiro. And then there's also Rentaro Mikuni, who plays Ichiro, and then he's the older brother, and then the younger brother is played by Kinya Kitaoji, who plays Sabu or Saburo. So you have these three brothers who live in the slums of Tokyo, and this was around the time of, well, not around the time, I guess it's a couple of decades afterwards, but it's still the holdover from the post-war period where there are still areas which were really rough and really not in a good condition whatsoever, and almost like a pigsty. And there is reference to that in the film of it's like living with pigs, and the conditions there. And even when they made the film, it was they would have to spray themselves down with a powder to prevent themselves from contracting smallpox. There was a concern that the crew would get that disease just by filming in this slum area in Tokyo. So yeah, there is definitely that feeling of a change in Japan, and they talk about that in some of the extras and the economic shift in the '60s and stuff, and the kind of youthful rebellion movement as well, because the younger brother, Sabu, he and his friends, they're kind of very focal points of the film as well, and there's such a kind of manic exuberance to them. You know, there's a sequence in particular where they're just like celebrating their freedom and their aliveness, and it's just a really in your face sequence. But it captures something. It captures a feeling of this kind of this build up almost of energy between all these kind of young characters who have no prospects in life, and they've decided they're going to make their own prospects in life, and they're going to go out there and they're going to take whatever they can. And so that is very much of the new generation post-war, and kind of where things were just changing in that country and stuff. But the story itself focuses on how far will you go for many different things. And I found this film psychologically fascinating because of that. And we really, you know, when you boil down this story, what it's really looking at is each of the three brothers having to decide how far are you willing to go for your own interests, and also how far are you willing to go for someone else. And I just loved the intensity of that, and it revolves around Ken Takakura's character Jiro. He decides he wants to steal this huge sum of money from a gang, also drugs included. You know, they millions and millions of yen, so a substantial amount. And he wants to leave the country, and he wants to go and find a new life for himself. Now, the youngest brother, Sabu, he resents his older brothers because they left the slums. They went off to try and make something of themselves. The older brother, Ichiro, he joined a gang, you know, and he was the first one to leave. And then Jiro, Ken Takakura's character, he kind of did the same thing, but he kind of ended up just in kind of like petty crime and stuff like that, and he ended up going to jail for something that he was framed for. And the film begins as he's out of jail and kind of contemplating his future, and he has some intel about this money that's being exchanged at a train station, and he has an accomplice who is a real slimy character, played by Shinjiro Ehara, and his character's name is Mizuhara. And Mizuhara is, I like how it establishes pretty early on that even he doesn't trust Jiro, you know, and that, you know, they're kind of got this plan, but he's still saying, look, you know, every man for himself. But you know, I need to kind of test how much I can trust you, and what we're about to do is a pretty, you know, is a pretty hefty thing to pull off. But they need more people than just the two of them to do this kind of heist. Basically, it feels a bit like a heist movie in the first act. So Jiro decides he's going to go to his younger brother and get Sabu and his friends to be his soldiers, and to be the ones to start a big distraction in the train station. Well, then he and Mizuhara will go and kind of hold up the gang members at gunpoint and take the money, and then pass it off. So it's I love the kind of you don't really see too much of them planning it. There is a really neat kind of device where you see Jiro and Mizuhara kind of applying black tape to the insides of sunglasses, and you think, what's that for? You know, and it's kind of Chekhov's sunglasses with the black tape on them, and you do find out what they're used for. I won't spoil it, but it was a really cool, like, interesting. So I like little bits like that, but you don't get too much of a grand plan. It just kind of happens, and you watch it. And that sequence in particular is one of the strongest of the film, where there's just so many cool angles going on, and once it all kicks off and the money has been stolen, the drugs have been stolen, everyone's running everywhere. There's police, there's the gang, there's the Jiro and his brother and his friends, and the camera angles are tilting, and you really feel the everything going out of balance, you know, and the way that Kinji Fukusaku kind of framed all of that, I think, just really helped visually convey the sense of chaos. Like, I really thought that was a great sequence. But the real, to really get to the meat of the story, is Sabu, the youngest brother. He he has the bag of money, and he goes back to the slums and goes to this shack, this building where him and his friends hang out. And he looks at the money and he realizes, man, my brother was really going to stiff me on the payoff for this. Why don't we just take it all for ourselves? So Jiro, Ken Takakura, the king of cool, he arrives at the building, and there's no Sabu, there's no money. There's just a girl who was one of the accomplices, and the character's name is Mako, played by Hiroki Shima, who's a really good actress. I really enjoyed her. I hasten to use the word feral, which might fit in a film called Wolves, Pigs and Men, but she has a kind of raw edge to her character that I thought was really captivating, and all of those young kids did. As I said, you really feel the burgeoning energy of youth, and she really encapsulated that as well. But she's the one who's left in this building, and Sabu's gone. So the whole film from then on out is trying to find Sabu, trying to find where he hid the money. And from then on out, it becomes a torture movie where we have Ken Takakura, Jiro, his accomplice, Mizuhara, who's a bit more sadistic, I should say. And they're torturing these kids to get the information. And they all decide as a collective group, these young teenagers, that they're not going to even let Sabu tell them where the money is. So there's nothing they can do. They can be tortured, but they can't say anything because they don't know anything. And they just decide collectively that they're going to fight this injustice. And so for Sabu, it becomes, how far are you willing to go to, right the wrongs of what you believe your brothers have laid down upon you by leaving you and your family in the slums. And their mother does die, and so Sabu was left behind to care for their mother when she was sick, and then she passes away. And so he feels like that the two brothers, they abandoned him and his mother, and so there's no love lost whatsoever. But he feels like that money, that could change my life, right, and my friends' lives. But he also has to stay in another room and listen to his friends be tortured and mutilated. And it's a brutal film. I was not expecting it to be this violent. It's not like a torture porn in terms of like Saw or Hostel, but it's certainly grim and grisly, and just the screams and it's quite visceral. It really gets under your skin. For me, it did anyway. And then it becomes, for those kids, like how far are we willing to go to protect our friend and all that kind of stuff, and will any of them crack for their own interests? And there's a really interesting part of the film, I think, where one of them gets their finger put in a vice, and his finger gets mangled, right, and he still says nothing. And then another kid who is substantially more nervous than the rest of them, and he played his part really well, I thought. When he gets taken in, he screams so much he basically passes out, and they throw him back into the room. And then the other teenager's like, well, his finger's not mutilated and mangled, so how come he gets, so then there's like, okay, now there's tension within the group, and, where's that going to lead? There's another character who is the girlfriend of Jiro, and this is Sane Nakahara, who would actually go on to be Kinji Fukusaku's wife. And she is an interesting character because I'm not quite sure what her kind of status is. It's implied that she's Jiro's mistress, or that maybe she's a mistress of some other rich man. I'm not entirely sure, because the wording of it in the subtitles made it seem like she was having an affair with Jiro, maybe. But either way, she's with him, and I just get the sense that she's someone who could also benefit from leaving the country and finding a new life. And she wants to come along to this shack and to witness the acts of torture. And she even has suggestions. And so there's kind of an underlying sadism to her character. But at the same time, there's things that she has to look away from as well. So there's just a lot of like frayed morality going on with all the characters in the film, which I just was so carried away with, And then we have the older brother, Rentaro Mikuni, as Ichiro. And he is a really fucking great actor. And I've definitely seen him in other things before. I heard in the commentary he's in Harakiri, which is an amazing film. So that's probably where I recognize him from, which I haven't seen that film for a very long time. but he's this guy who's in he's in the Yakuza, right? And his younger brothers have been causing some trouble, so he's in a bit of a tricky, delicate spot. And so he's trying to navigate that. And he's also kind of saying, look, it's my brothers. Let me deal with it. Let me try and get the money, and save face a little bit here. But I love the way that his character just becomes slowly more defeated throughout the film, and you even get to see that in the way that they style him. So he just looks more disheveled as the film goes on. A little bit of 5 o'clock shadow. The hair gets a little bit floppier and greasy. I think they really convey, and it's to do with his performance as well. But he really gets kind of worn down by this whole predicament until it all comes to a head when the three brothers finally come together in the third act. So I just loved the morality. That was something that, and I was just like trying to put myself into and that's something that films can do sometimes, where you'll watch it and you'll see it like an emotionally complex situation, and you think, what would I do in that kind of scenario? Would I, torture my brother for the sake of millions of dollars that would change my life? And of course the answer for me would be no. But what if you were a person like that, who had to fight for everything and lived in absolute squalor, and were estranged from family? Would that make it okay? Would you still be able to do it knowing that it's your blood? Even if you hated their guts, would there not be that inch of you that would think, this is still like my brother? We share the same mother. How can I do something like this to him? I loved all that stuff. So as I said, for Sabu, it's like, how far is he willing to kind of keep his mouth shut and be brutalized and see his friends become brutalized for this money? And I love how even you kind of question, is it even about the money after a certain point, or is it just the principle and just a way for him to kind of stick it to his brother, to Jiro, for leaving? And then for Jiro, it's about, again, how far am I willing to take this, for the money, but by harming my family, and maybe even showing my girlfriend how far I'm willing to go and how far I'm willing to stoop for the sake of money. How important is that really to someone? And then for Ichiro, Rentaro Mikuni's character, it's about, how far am I willing to go in this kind of, again, scenario where I need to rat out my brothers, and, probably their lives would be taken by the Yakuza if he turned them in. So what means more to him, family or his status and position in organized crime? So that comes later on, but it's really the Jiro Sabu relationships that's the most interesting, I think. And I just loved how it built upon itself, and how that whole situation in that shack continued to get darker and deeper. And then by the end, when you have the three brothers coming together, I just thought that it was dynamite stuff. Like, it was just so captivating. In the final 4 or 5 minutes, I was like edge of my seat, like, what the hell is going to happen? And then the ending happened, and I was completely surprised by the direction that it took. And it was, it was to do with performance, it was to do with direction, it was to do with, again, just thinking about the heightened reality of it all. And that is something that, you can get from films. It makes you think about your own life and situations you could be in, put through the lens of something a bit more extreme that that you would never be involved in yourself personally. But I just like that stuff. And so what made this film tick psychologically for me was just super enjoyable and entertaining and captivating. So I absolutely loved this film. I thought it was incredible. The opening is really interesting, and I actually would recommend rewatching the opening credits after you've seen the film, because the opening credits is like lots of like still photographs and kind of quick clips and things that shows you the kind of the backstory of the three brothers. And when I first saw it, I thought it was quite a striking opening title sequence and everything, but I had assumed that this was footage from the film that you'd eventually see throughout the 95 minutes or so of the runtime. But going back to the beginning, no, there's so much that none of that is in the film. So they really put a lot of time into, again, being a Toei production, where this was certainly not a healthily budgeted affair. Perhaps they didn't put so much time into it, but there is that attention to detail where you get to see kind of the three brothers and little snapshots of their lives before the film starts, so to speak. And I really thought that was great. And also the way the film opens with this panning shot across I think there's a little river and there's the slum area and it's a bridge. And so you actually open the film by that bridge and the film ends with a significant moment by that bridge. I think I do want to talk spoilers at the end, just to talk about how the film ends, because I really want to just give a little bit of my thoughts on that and how the film ends with that bridge, kind of. So yeah, I enjoyed all the characters. I thought that Ken Takakura was, again, he is the king of cool. He is this kind of just Clint Eastwood type. A lot of people go to that comparison, but it's kind of apt. He just has that rugged kind of coolness about him. There's an aura that he projects whenever he's on screen. I really love Ken Takakura, but usually he plays a more honorable type, and this was even then against type for him. He's playing a bit more of a ruthless guy, but I still feel like he is the protagonist. And I have a little bit to say about that as we talk about the extras, actually. And what I like about the extras on this release is that there's a lot of them, but also there's some contradictions, which are quite interesting. So I liked his kind of, I feel like he did a lot behind his eyes with his performance and stuff. And each of the three brothers have very wildly different performances. And Sabu, there's a burning rage underneath the skin of that guy, which is really conveyed well by Kinya Kitaoji. I don't think I'd seen him in anything before, but I thought he was fantastic. So a great cast, and just that teenage group, there is a real just, they feel like found family. You really feel the bond that they have. The only thing I didn't like about the film was there's a sequence where they run out into like the slums and they chase these dogs around. And my first thought was Isle of Dogs, and there's all like trash and stuff and there's dogs. But then I realized they're like trying to like, I think, kick the dogs or like hit them with sticks and stuff, and I became a bit uncomfortable with that. And then they do kill one of the dogs and they take the body back and they're celebrating and they're going to cook and eat the dog. And I'm pretty sure you do see a dead dog over the shoulders of one of them. But, and it's talked about that in the commentary by Jasper Sharp with like, it was meant to kind of show the stray dogs that were left behind after the post-war kind of, rebuilding of the city and of the country, I suppose. And there was so many stray dogs that apparently they would round them up, but many were left behind. And then there's the character of Mizuhara, who I think added a lot to the film, because he was the kind of the objective party in a way, because he wasn't a brother, he wasn't related to these people, so he could really needle the kind of the situation from time to time, which really helped like push things in different directions. But I also loved how he kind of came across as the most sadistic character, but also like the weakest one. There's a great moment when finally Ichiro shows up, the eldest brother, and Mizuhara kind of like, he starts kind of puffing his chest out a bit and stuff, and Ichiro just walks up to him just like with this kind of like almost vacant look on his face, just like, well, yeah, go on then, try it. Just try it then. Just this like ice cold, like indifferent confidence. And Mizuhara just folds like paper. He's like, okay. Like, I love that moment so much. It shows you that this weaselly guy, who kind of has all this kind of like, yeah, let's just torture them. And like, there is a scene that's very suggestive of rape as well. It's an extreme film in that regard. It doesn't show a whole lot, but it implies some pretty intense and adult things. But when pushed into a situation like that, he just folds. I really enjoyed that moment. So one of the notes I had was for the film was brutal but captivating, and I think that really sums up the film for me. So let's talk a little bit about the Blu-ray. Look at the cover here. I really like the kind of Japanese title there behind the English translation, and you get to see Jiro there, Ken Takakura, kind of mid-torture, and I just love the face in the background. It's a really nice, and even just the color feels kind of sickly, and I think that fits the the feel of it. On the spine, I'd say that a film by Kinji Fukasaku is so small it almost shouldn't be there, perhaps. But it's a nice slipcover. On the back, you get obviously the summary of the film and talk about the extras. 1080p presentation on Blu-ray for restoration of the original film elements supplied by Toei. Original Japanese audio track, uncompressed mono, and then all of the extras, which we'll talk about in due course. And then on the inside, it is the same artwork, as you can see, and the back is also identical. And we have the disc, another kind of shots of one of the torture sequences from the film, and then we have the booklet. And I often leave the booklet until last, but let's talk about it now. On the front there, you have the kind of teenage gang. There's a very dynamic shot of them. I like just the way they're arranged and stuff. And there's a lot of that in the film where just the framing and composition is really nicely done. On the back, a bloody hand. That's one of the kind of mangled series of digits that we see in the film. And on the inside, we have the cast list. Got Rentaro Mikuni there on the left. Although I will say it's interesting, on the cast list, Rentaro Mikuni is credited as Kuroki, not as Ichiro. And that is because his surname, the surname of all three of them is Kuroki, but I don't know why his actual first name, Ichiro, is not there. And then we have an essay called A Beast with Bite, Kinji Fukasaku's Early Yakuza Cinema and Wolves, Pigs and Men by Joe Hickenbottom. This one kind of dives into Kinji's kind of first few films at Toei, and also kind of the state of the studio system around that time and what Toei was kind of focusing on in terms of the domestic market in the 1960s and having big budgeted productions, but allowing kind of these younger directors to kind of get chances to direct some like lower budget kind of short kind of features that would be lumped into double bills, triple bills, kind of, there was a lot of films made in the 1960s in Japan. And it goes into that and how Kinji Fukasaku kind of got his first few films made. I think he made like 5 films, or 6 films even, in like the first year that he started becoming a director in his own right. And it talks about the transition from the Ninkyo Yakuza film, the kind of chivalrous style in which you have like a Yakuza gang and you have like this lone wolf who comes in and kind of does the honorable thing, and he might be a gang member himself, but he's a Yakuza with honor, and that was the Ninkyo style, which was very popular. But by the time the 1970s rolled around, Kinji Fukasaku had started to make a film called Battles Without Honor and Humanity, which dives into more of a true story about a Yakuza crime boss, and almost overnight, really, a whole new kind of style of Yakuza film was born. The Jitsuroku, the true account kind of films, which have more of a newsreel style to them, and it's a bit more kind of like, like handheld cameras and stuff, and that newspaper cuttings and things, but and just a brutal kind of nihilistic outlook on, crime gangs, basically, and not so much on the kind of maybe fuzzy kind of, oh, it's all good in the end because there's a few good eggs in there in the Yakuza, So the Jitsuroku was a different style, which was hugely popularized by Kinji Fukasaku's film Battles Without Honor and Humanity, which got numerous sequels very quickly. But it points out, Joe Hickenbottom points out that style really is previewed here in Wolves, Pigs and Men, and that perhaps the Japanese audience was just not ready for it yet in 1964, because it didn't do well, and it's only really been rediscovered in recent years and stuff, and reappraised and everything. So it's a really good article. I really enjoyed it. Again, it's a few things I'd already heard in other parts of the Blu-ray and stuff, but it's very well written, and I liked how it focused on what the Japanese film industry was doing around that time and how Kinji Fukasaku played into that, and also Ken Takakura. So the on-disc extras, we have Slums, Stars, and Studios. Producer Toru Yoshida. He talks about, this is kind of a fairly recent interview, and he talks about how he got started in the film industry. He started as a facilitator at Toei, which he hated. It was kind of just getting things done for people odd jobs and things, nothing of any substance or creativity, and he was not a big fan of that at all. But he worked his way up to be a producer. And he studied French literature, and he doesn't name check a specific novel, but he says that the story of Wolves, Pigs, and Men comes from French literature, and it stands to reason to me that there would be this kind of maybe classic story about three brothers and kind of a moral quandary and everything, because it's a strong story, you know, and put through this lens of the slums of Tokyo and the Yakuza, I think just works so well. But this was a really great interview. I really enjoyed hearing slash reading through the subtitles in Japanese, of course. His recollections of working with Kinji Fukusaku in this film in particular. And also how he fell out with Kinji Fukusaku after the film kind of didn't do very well, and there was a strike, you know, during the filming which delayed things, and they had to take out the union crew and bring in the different crew members and things, and you know, different people were blamed for, you know, the failings of this film, and he talks about how Kinji Fukusaku pulled him aside and kind of chewed him out and stuff. That I already talked about the smallpox. He talks about that, and kind of they had the kind of powder they'd put on themselves before they would go on set, on location, to a real slum to film you know, the location stuff. I'm sure almost 1,000% positive that the interior of the shack was done on a stage somewhere, but certainly all the outside stuff is done in a real slum, and that adds a lot of production value to the story, because that griminess is you know, fully on display when you see it, and you know, you can feel why those characters, in particular Sabu, feel so strongly about an opportunity to change their life, I think. He tells an interesting story about how Kinji Fukusaku and Rentaro Mikuni didn't get on very well. And then and there's a moment where he was just asking Rentaro to turn around. He's like, no. And it was to do with some like motivation of his character or whatever. And he said it was so stupid, we just stood there and they're just shouting at each other, and Mikuni is refusing to turn around and stuff. He talked about how the film was meant to be in color, and they pulled that out kind of at the last minute for budgetary reasons, and it became black and white. I think the film looks great in black and white, and it suits it. But certainly it was one of those things where they didn't have a whole lot of faith in the film, and it was one of those probably relegated to a double bill presentation, perhaps, or it wasn't like its own kind of star showing. And from things that I've been beginning to learn through some of these Eureka releases is that in Japan in the 60s there were a lot of double bill, triple bill kind of showings, and films built specifically to serve that kind of purpose. But I thought it was a fascinating interview, and probably my favorite one on the disc. The next one is Socially Aware Violence with Junya Sato. And I've seen clips from, I think, this interview on the release of The Bullet Train, which was directed by Junya Sato. So he was a director in his own right. He co-wrote the film with Fukusaku, and he talks about the making of this and how he, you know, for his recollections, Kinji Fukusaku was not keen at all on making this film, as he says, at any stage of production. And that it was Sane Nakahara, who plays Ken Takakuro's girlfriend and would in real life become Fukusaku's wife. She was much more enthusiastic about the film, and in some ways was a facilitator of the shoot, which is a very interesting tidbit for sure. The area in Tokyo where they filmed it was called the Island of Dreams. Very ironic, I guess, moniker for a place like that. And it's interesting because it almost feels like he doesn't know Kinji Fukusaku very well, which I mean stands to reason. They wrote a film together, you know, 50 years ago. You know, I think this is the 50th anniversary of the film's, no, 60th it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, Jesus Christ, yeah. So, very long time ago. And I believe the interview with Junya Sato was done a few years ago, but I'm not sure whether that's the case of his. He doesn't have a very good memory of stuff, but and he's like, I'm not that familiar with Kinji's films, so it's not this great kind of pairing between two great directors where they were great friends or anything. It was maybe even just you know, just one of those contractual things where they came together and had to write the film and stuff, and he was selected, and there was no love lost. In the end of the interview, Sato talks about how uh, for him, Japan is only at peace superficially right now. Um, but that on a global scale, it isn't by no means peaceful. And I was like, how does this relate to the film? And I just couldn't. I went back and read it again, and I'm just thinking, what is he's talking about? That Japan is only at peace right now superficially, and everyone knows it, but on a global scale, it's by no means peaceful. I mean, I guess there is logic in it, but I don't know what the point was as relating to him talking about Kinji Fukusaku or the film Wolves, Pigs, and Men. So it was a bit of an underwhelming interview for me. It didn't really offer much insight, and from his perspective, Fukusaku, this was just a job for him. He didn't really care about any of it. And then elsewhere, it feels a bit like it's the opposite almost, and that he was really invested in it. And there's a story that Fukusaku and Sato, they holed up in an inn for like 3.5 weeks to write the script. But from Sato's point of view, Kinji just, they could never really get on the same page, and so he left, and Sato just wrote the film, you know. So yeah, you definitely sometimes get those conflicting stories, especially when it's a film that was made decades ago, and it might very well be a case of the memory not serving very well or just not having an interesting story to tell. The third video piece on the Blu-ray is a little interview with the biographer of Kinji Fukusaku, Sadayo Yamamne, who did record something for something else. There's a little title card at the beginning that says that this was from a different project, and the original footage was lost a number of years ago. But they have a final cut of this little sequence about the film Wolves, Pigs, and Men. But there's a time code kind of burned into the image, which didn't really bother me too much. But it was great that they were able to salvage it and at least use it. I really enjoyed this one. It was filmed in 2017, and he talks about, well, the film, obviously, but it was really well presented, I think, and it just really concise. Like, he had a lot of interesting things to say and more contradictions, you know, as I was kind of alluding to. He talks about how Ken Takakura was concurrently filming at the time of this film Tales of Japanese Chivalry, and he contributes that to why the filming was delayed. So from Yamamne, it was the fact that Ken Takakura was filming another film, why the film was delayed and halted, and for Junya Sato, it was because there was a union strike. Maybe it was both, you know. He also the biographer calls Ken Takakura's character the villain of the film, and I don't think I'd fully agree, but I'm more on that side, that he's kind of an antagonist, even though we kind of follow him as the main character. But I found that more interesting. Whereas Junya Sato, who wrote the film, he views Ken Takakura as the hero, the protagonist. And so it's like, you know, and I guess the writer kind of has kind of the final say, but I do think also interpretation makes up a large amount of how you should view a film, really. Even if what you got out of a film maybe doesn't line up with what the creative intent was by the creator itself. And he also talks about how Kinji Fukusaku had a lot of like artistic intentions with this, and he talks about those intentions, which is just completely the opposite of what Junya Sato said, that he really had no interest in the film at any level at any point in time, you know. So who do you believe? And maybe Junya Sato just didn't like Kinji Fukusaku, and maybe feels like his career as a director was overshadowed by him, and so when it came around to many years later as an old man being interviewed about him for a Blu-ray release, he was like, oh yeah, no, he didn't care about that stuff, you know. So yeah, I'm not sure, you know. And I just feel like the film was so well made, I find it hard to believe that Kinji Fukusaku was checked out when he made this, because it's just so well done. And there's only so much you can account for in terms of, well, the acting was really great. And the whole package is put together so well. And the train station heist sequence was apparently shot guerrilla style, so they just did it, you know. And the public kind of reacted as they did, which I think is really cool and interesting, and you know, explains why that scene feels so raw and real. And another detail I really liked about the film, they do it twice, I think, but the main instance that kind of springs to mind is when in the train station, the young teenagers, they cause the big kind of commotion. And Ken Takakura puts a gun in the back of the Yakuza members who are meeting to exchange the money. and he basically instructs them on what to do, but you don't hear what he says. You see his mouth moving, and he's telling them, he's giving them what for, but you don't hear it. You hear all of the kind of chaos going on in the train station, but you don't hear the dialogue. Such an effective device. Certainly not something that had never been done before, but really effective. I thought that was a really interesting choice. And finally, we have, of course, well, not finally, there's also the commentary to talk about, but we finally, of the video extras, we have the trailer for the film. I liked how it highlights in kind of title cards the role of each brother in terms of the wolf, the pig, and the man. That was kind of interesting. And a unique gangster film. I love all the captions and stuff. It's, there's so many captions in like kind of East Asian trailers, and I've talked about that many times before. But the run that I really enjoyed in this one was try putting your hands on me, you'll end up full of holes. I bet on this mountain. Give me hope. Give me the sun. Give me the sun. It's just doesn't quite seem to align with most of the film, But the line, I think it is a line from the film. Try putting your hands on me, you'll end up full of holes. I actually think that's what Rentaro Mikuni says to the character Mizuhara when he kind of challenges him. So always nice to have the trailer. I enjoyed seeing the marketing for this film. And then we have a commentary with Jasper Sharp. Really enjoyed it. He spends a lot of time talking about other films, almost to the point where I just wish I had like a checklist of like, it feels like there's like 50 more films I want to see in kind of that era of Japanese cinema that really piqued my interest when he was talking about them. But he goes into how there was a Rotterdam retrospective of Kinji Fukusaku's work that really led to a lot of that kind of rediscovery of his previous films and things. And he mentions that particular retrospective a number of times. And talks about his career as you would expect. One interesting thing that came out of this was the composer for the film, Isao Tomita, I believe was his name. And he talks about his career a little bit and how he was a huge international name because he was a big kind of electronic musician, I should say music guy. I'll leave that in for free. He was a big electronic musician, and he did reimaginings of kind of classical musical pieces using electronic instruments. And one of those was Gustav Holst's The Planet, which I love. The Planets, which is a suite of music that I adore and have done since I was a kid. So I've been listening to that on Spotify over the past week and loving it. So that was a cool kind of thing to learn and then kind of put into practice and listen to it and enjoy it. So that was something I never would have expected to have found otherwise. And he talks about the actors and yeah, really, really good commentary. He knows his stuff. It's not really scene specific for the most part. It really is just kind of an overview of, again, even the bits that you kind of read about in the booklet, the Japanese film industry at that point in time, but also Ken Takakura's career and how that was kind of where this film sits for him and stuff, and the same with Kinji Fukusaku. So really, really good commentary. I really enjoyed it a lot. And overall, the Blu-ray was fantastic. I loved the film, loved the extras, loved learning more about Japanese cinema and the film industry, and just came away wanting to see more of Ken Takakura, of Yakuza films, and Japanese cinema in general. So I think you can't really go too wrong with that. I absolutely adored this release. This is like a 5-star release for me. I can't really praise it highly enough. And the ending. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. But I do want to talk about the ending very briefly. So we have this kind of standoff with Sabu and Jiro inside the shack. And by the way, apparently it's Ichiro means first son, Jiro means second son, and Saburo means third son, apparently. So like their names are literally kind of marking who they are in terms of chronology from what was mentioned in, I think, the audio commentary. So you have the youngest and then Ken Takakura inside the shack, and you have Rentaro Mikuni outside the shack, and now all the Yakuza are turned up, and they know that the people they want are inside that kind of rundown building in the slums. And I think there's even a bit where they're kind of, putting their hands over their mouths and stuff, like, oh god, it stinks here, It's just further highlighting the wolves, pigs, and men of this world and story. And we have Ichiro outside kind of pleading with his brothers, to kind of turn themselves in and to tell them where did you hide the money? And Sabu says, I'll tell you where I hid the money. Just do me one thing. And Ichiro's like, anything, what is it? And Sabu says, come in here and join us. I almost got choked up thinking about that. Like, we've all gone through so much. We hate each other's guts. And this high intensity like moment where like it's life and fucking death, and they've got guns, and it's the Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid moment. They all know they're probably gonna die, and Sabu's like, I'll tell you where the money is, but you come and you stand with us as brothers. And then even Kentakuro's like, yeah, come on, let's do it. Like, fuck all this shit, just come on, let's just come with us, right? Brothers in arms. Like we've probably never really been brothers. Let's do it once in our lives, right? And he can't quite do it. And the Yakuza run in and they shoot everyone dead. And it's like, fuck it. And they're just the bodies splayed across the floor. Everyone's dead. And you just have the eldest brother stood there just almost just shell-shocked, And what could he do? Because if he went into that building, he would have died anyway, right? And it's just, and then as he's leaving, all the people who live in the slums have been watching this whole kind of, this whole commotion. It's a bit more than a commotion with all the killing that was going on, but this chaos, this massacre. And as he begins to slowly walk away, Ichiro, they just start throwing shit at him, and he slowly walks out of the slums across the bridge. And they throw shit at him because he's not one of them anymore. Oh, beautiful! That whole ending for me elevated everything. It's a 5-star film for me. I just think that it got so much right, and I just love how, again, the film opened with that bridge, and you're kind of on the side of looking to the slums. This kind of high. Maybe a crane shot, I don't know, but it's a very high shot looking over the slums and stuff, and it's like, this is where we're going to start this story, and at the end, this is where our last surviving brother leaves, and we follow it in the opposite direction visually, as he's kind of a disgrace and a shame to his own family, and fucking great, man. What a great film. I'll leave it there. I just wanted to rave about how fucking great that ending was. Excuse all the F-bombs. I just, I feel like, and my chair, by the way, it keeps slipping down. So if you skim through this video, you'll see me slowly sink as the review goes on. I need to get a new chair. But yeah, again, excuse all the swearing, but I really feel like it's worth the emphasis, because that's what this film embodies to me. Is it puts emphasis on shit, and yeah, I'm really keen to check it out. I might try and show it to Connie, actually, because I was so taken with the film, and you can see I put up a video about it a couple of weeks ago, just to rave about what I was enjoying about the morality complexities that are kind of baked into the story. I'm rambling now, but thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed Wolves, Pigs and Men, Kinji Fukusaku, who is becoming a firm favorite of mine, because I loved Message from Space. What a great sci-fi space opera that was, and then I love Battle Royale. Now I love this film, and I've enjoyed other films of his that I've seen, like The Fall of Akko Castle, like Jidaigeki films, right? Jitsudoku films, right? Space opera, like there's just, I love the broad scope of his filmography, and they do talk about in the booklet how he was really just like a studio, like like a hired hand almost. Like he would make the films that Toei wanted him to make, but he was still able to put through his own creativity through them, and to kind of do something a bit more elevated artistically, which maybe some other directors just didn't, and they weren't able to break out of that rigid kind of studio system when it came to mandated films that they were supposed to direct. I'll leave it there. I'm waffling on for too long, but thank you for watching once again, and I'll see you next time. あってなんかねえよどこだっていいよ
この町離れて何もかにも捨ててよどっかに行くんだあてなんかねえよおーおさらばするんだああ